Welcome everyone and welcome to this week's F1 Fix Setup Track Guide. We are at Suzuka, one of my favourite tracks to come around, and I now know why the F1 drivers in real life love coming to this place, because this car is phenomenal around here. This track really showcases what this car has to give us with the Senna S's, 130R, Spoon Corner. This car just eats them up, and it's just an absolute joy to drive. I ran so many laps around here putting this track guide together for you just out of pure enjoyment. And it's going to throw up some great races here this week as well, I bet. So we are in the fixed setup as always, but we're in the race trim. We are not in the quali trim, so that means we are limited to the balanced battery deployment, and we do run about half a tank of fuel. That is the one thing that I do change, as well as the brake bias, which I will come on to when we look at the lap in question in front of us. Now, you'll be noticing that I'm on the yellow wall tyre, which is the medium tyre. Suzuka is known for being hard on the tyres around here, so while the soft tyre is probably quicker over a single lap, it's not going to be the race tyre that we're going to want to use. It's just not going to last as long. And Suzuka, as we always know, even in the middle of winter, the temperatures can be quite high. So I think the medium tyre is going to be the choice this week, especially in the fixed series. In the open setup series, where the races are longer, it may even be the hard tyre. So something to be aware of, guys, heading into the races this week. Now, the lap time I set was a 1:26.4 in a track temperature of 24 degrees. As always, for anyone who is new to these track guides, I set the track conditions as per iRacing's schedule, the time and date, and then just generate the weather, because that is roughly, generally speaking, what the conditions are going to be in the races throughout the week. So it's consistent. The time that you see will be consistent with what you'll see in the series when you actually, or in the officials when you actually race. But yeah, as always, we're gonna have a hot lap from a cockpit view. You're then going to see that from a far chase camera angle, and then we are going to review that and analyze that lap and see how we did it, braking markers, turning points, etc. So yeah, lo and behold, guys, let's head into it. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and enjoy. So guys, here we are. Let's see how we did that lap. Now, I just want to bring your attention, before we start looking at the lap, just want to bring your attention to the dash. Now, we always want to be concentrating on this yellow figure here, which is our battery level. Now, it's 99. I would like that to be 100. But of course, when you're doing your qualifying laps in particular, you want to make sure that you take it easy on your out lap so as not to drain any of the battery, and then start with 100% because you need as much deployment as possible. Now, of course, in a race situation, this is going to fluctuate because balance mode is going to be deploying the battery and recharging at various points throughout the race. So we don't have any control over that. We can't click build or select attack mode. So that is a bit out of our control. But in this scenario, of course, I'm trying to put the fastest lap together for you guys what I can in race trim, and I want as much battery as possible. Now, the other figure to be aware of is this orange number, which indicates our brake bias level. Now, you may be thinking, Scott, how have you got that below 54? Now, it's all to do with the brake bias fine adjustment, which you can change in car. I'm not going to elaborate on how to do that now. It's an easy in-car adjustment. If you want to see how I did that, I will link a short video that I put together in how to change your brake bias to below 54. It's really nice and easy, but we are using a 52.5 brake bias this time around. I did try with 53, but that was just I was still locking up the fronts. It is a little bit hard on the front tyres around here, and yeah, something this was a nice sweet spot for me. So use this as a base. Brake bias is all personal preference, and yeah, go from there. Now, let's head on to the lap itself. And you'll be seeing I started this lap in third gear. Of course, we've just come through the last chicane, and we'll discuss that at the end of the lap that we're about to analyse. Now, you'll notice that the first DRS zone starts just before the start-finish line here, because we've got the main straight. And you can see the 4 green lights on the dash that indicates my DRS is open. Now, we're running down to the first corner, which, if anyone is familiar with Suzuka, is famous in its own right, really, compared to the other named corners around here, such as Spoon and 130R, because it is a very fast double apexed corner. Now, in this car, we have a lot of downforce available to us, so we'll be taking this very differently, shall we say, even to an F3 car or a GT car. But what we keep an eye out for, firstly, is this runoff here, which we do in any car that we're in, because this little concrete runoff, this indicates our turning point, which is just before the 50 or level with the 50 ball marker. And you can see here that we're turning in. Now, one thing to be aware of, guys, here is turning in too sharply, because you will see just there that my DRS has only just deactivated pretty much on top of me being on the corner. It is very, very close. You're carrying so much speed. Now, when you've got your DRS open as well, you've got a lack of downforce, because of course the air is being allowed to travel through the wing rather than over it, planting the rear of the car down. So you need to be very careful with how sharply you turn into this first corner. I can say from experience that the first few laps I did here, I turned in too sharply and I lost the rear, because we've got a lack of downforce. We've got more top speed, lack of downforce. So you need to be careful with your steering inputs. And you can see I've only got the steering slightly turned, the steering wheel there. So that's the first thing to be aware of. So concrete runoff is our turning point, and then a very light steering input to start off with into the first corner. Now, the third thing to be aware of is our braking marker. And you can see here that as I get to this red and white curb, I'm coming off the throttle and I'm then starting to apply the brake. Hitting the apex and allowing the car to drift out to the left-hand side here, because this is a double apex first corner. a fast one, all the while trail braking, and we're going to shift down into 5th gear here. Now be careful of using too much of this runoff. There's very little grip on this AstroTurf, and if you get your front right wheels, or your right wheels, sorry, over this curb, this white line, it is an off track, so just be wary of that, guys. So we've got our left wheels on the red and white curb, all the while trail braking, and then as we've got over halfway round the corner and we start to see the second apex come into view, that's when we shift down into 5th, and then we entirely lift off of the brake, because we're now going uphill and we want the momentum of the car to carry us just around this corner before we start to get on the throttle. And you can see here that I now start to get on the throttle as I'm pretty much into the apex. And then from here, guys, you just want to trust the downforce. Allow the downforce to do its thing, get on full throttle, start to unwind the steering wheel, open up the steering, using the red and white curb on the left hand side, and then you're very quickly up into 6th gear there. As you can see, we know how quickly we have to shift up the gears here. From 1st to 6th, they come at you like anything. In a blink of an eye, you're in 6th gear, and then very quickly we're over to the right hand side and we head into the center S's, which these corners come at you so fast, but they're so enjoyable when you hook them up. It really is a joy to drive. So we're over to the right hand side and we want to start turning in. As you can see, as we just start to see the apex come into view, that's when we want to start turning in. So I'll slow it down again, and you can see we're in 7th gear, and we want to aim to get our left wheels on this red and white curb. You can see where there's loads of rubber on the curb, because that's where we're getting our left wheels, because these corners here, the center S's, are all about setting up the next corner. That's entirely what they are. So they're all about keeping it as tight as you can to open up the entry into the next corner, because they come at you so quickly. So we are tight to this apex here, so that we're tight when we exit, so that we're then opened up the next right hander, which comes at you in the blink of an eye. So entry into 7th gear. Once you get out of it, you can see here I'm starting to get on the brakes, and I'm only ever so slightly on the brakes. It's like a dab of the brakes. As you can see, they're very, very minimal, but it's enough to get the nose of the car turning to the right with the downshift into 6th as well, because 7th gear here we just don't get enough turning of the car. And you can see I'm just trail braking ever so slightly. Once again, getting our wheels up on the right hand side of the curb, on the red and white curb, and then we're back on the throttle as we get over it. Try not to allow the car to run too far over to the left here, guys. If you get your wheels on to this left curb, in all honesty, you've carried too much speed through there, and you've compromised your line into the next left-hander, and it will just compromise you for the rest of the first sector, all the way up to under the bridge. So full throttle here. There's no need to properly swing the car out to the right-hand side, because we've got so much downforce here that we can afford to be in the middle of the track here. We don't want to cover any unnecessary track because it costs us time. And then there's an ever so slight lift, as you can see, to once again control the weight transfer of the car and get the nose turning in. Left wheels up on the curb. This will be better seen from the far chase camera angle, so I advise going back and checking there. You can see where my wheels are in relation to the AstroTurf and the curb. And then as we get onto it, you can see we're back on full throttle. And it brings us out nicely on the right hand side of the track here, middle right hand side. And then very quickly, you can see, as we approach this red and white curb, I'm getting on the brake. And I'm just it's just an ever so slight trail brake, ever so slightly, shifting down into fifth. And we're trail braking, controlling the nose of the car, keeping it tight to this apex. And then, as you can see here, as the halo gets to the seating period here, the seating area, sorry, in the middle of this hill, that's when you then start to get on full throttle. And in relation to the curb, it's around halfway around the curb. Keeping it tight, full throttle. I actually got my wheels on the curb there, which probably cost me a little bit of time because there's not really any grip there. We want to be as close to it as we can without actually being on it. But what that does, by being tight there, that brings us out into the middle of the track. Now this is a really enjoyable section here because if you get that exit right, with the downforce we've got in this car, it is full throttle all the way up this next section. And what you'll see in other series is people really kind of swing the car out to the right hand side so that they're near this white line. We don't need to do that in this car. As we said a little bit earlier, we don't want to cover any unnecessary track. So you don't need to properly swing the car out to open up the corner here. You can exit the corner we've just come out of, the right-hander. It brings us middle right-hand side of the track anyway, and that is plenty. You're in 6th gear, and then it is just full throttle, keeping it tight here, moving up the gears, using as much track as you can on the exit, keeping it tight, and then we come to the kink. I don't know the official name of these two right-handers. I know they do have names, but I like to call it the kink because it's very fast here. And what we keep an eye out for is the 50 ball marker. We're over to the left-hand side so we can open up the corner. This will be an overtaking opportunity if you really do get a drive up the hill here. But as always, it's a risky place to overtake because you need to be sure that if you're on the inside, that you don't cut this inside curb too much because it's very high, it can unsettle the car, and there's just loads of gravel on the exit of this corner, and it's very punishable. It's very difficult to stop the car once you get on that gravel because you're pretty much guaranteed to go into the wall, and as we know, these F1 cars are fragile. So if you do get an overtaking opportunity around here, you need to be sure that once you get to the corner while overtaking, that you really slow the car down enough that when you come through the kink, you're not running out of track on exit. So it's a risky overtaking maneuver, that's for sure. It always has been in any car. Now, 50 is our turning point. As you can see, we start to turn in, and this is a very, very fast corner. We apply very little brake here. It's almost like just a little dab of the brakes, enough to get the nose turning in. And you can see we want to hit the inside of this curb. It's quite raised. We don't want to go over the green stuff there. And as we hit that curb, back on full throttle. Now, in all honesty, I probably hit that too hard. You can see how much it kind of bobbles up and down, but I was lucky enough to get away from it. In a race scenario, I'd want to avoid that, in all honesty. But because we've got so much downforce, I'm not running over out of track. I'm not on the AstroTurf here. As we know, this AstroTurf, if you go over, it's an off track, and it can be quite, it kind of sucks the bottom of the car in and acts like a railroad track. You can't get off of it until you're pretty much off of it, and then there's gravel. So as I said, just be careful carrying too much speed through there. But the next corner comes at you so quickly. As I said, the Suzuka, the corners come at you so fast, especially in the first couple of sectors. So wind it back slightly because we go through the kink, we're back on full throttle, and then once you've straightened out the car, you're then back on to the brakes. Braking in a straight line here and shifting down into 5th gear, and we turn in just as we get to the end of the curb. That's our turning point, guys. Trail braking through, hitting this apex so we get our wheels as close to the red and white curb as we can, or close to the AstroTurf that's on the inside of the red and white curb as we can. A little bit of the car shooting up there, but that was neatly done. And then unwinding the steering, allow the car to drift over to the left. Now this was very, very fine margins. I was ever so close to getting an off track here. If you get your wheels over, if you get your right wheels on the inside of this red and white curb, it is an off track. So be careful in your qualifying laps, that's for sure. It is only a 1X, but as we come out of this corner, you'll see there, because this curb is very bumpy, the revs are kind of all over the place. So what I discovered, the quickest way up this hill and the best way to control the car, the torque of the car, was just to short shift into 6th gear. Short shift from 5th into 6th. If we play it in full speed, you'll see. Because the car's just bobbling up and down so much, the revs are too inconsistent, and coming off of there in 5th gear, I was hitting the engine, I was hitting the rev limiter, so shifting into 6th was just perfect, and I carried a nice amount of speed up the hill. It didn't affect the control of the car. Up into 7th, and this here is, we're coming into the hairpin. This is the most difficult corner on the track. You're going to see so many people's races end here. One, due to locking up, and 2, because we're down very low in the gears, all the way into 2nd, and we know what this car is like in the lower gears. There's so much torque, and people just seem to be in the lower gears and just spin up the rears. I've been guilty of it, I must admit, and it's something I'm trying to improve. So, in 7th gear here, keeping it tight to the apex because we want to open up the tight left-hander. And this is where your brake bias really comes into effect, guys. I had this set at 54 at first, then dropped it down to 53, and then settled on 52.5 because I was just locking up the tyres too often, and it was to do with the brake bias, because I didn't want to bring my braking marker any further back, because if I'm doing that, I'm then braking while going into a corner, which is just a no-no, really. You want to avoid that at all possible. So we start to brake as we get to the end of the red and white curb, because then we're now braking into a straight line, opening up the right-hander, and we're going to shift all the way down into 2nd gear here, guys. Nice and tight. I'm covering the brake ever so slightly. In hindsight, you don't want to be doing that. I would like to be off of the brake at this point here, just to allow the car's momentum to carry it round. You'll gain more speed that way. But I was so nervous of this hairpin every single time I went round it. I wanted to be safe then. Sorry. And then, as you can see here, we've got the steering at full lock here. So you need to be very, very careful with your throttle inputs. This is why so many people are going to spin the car, because they're going to be too eager to get on the throttle. And when you've got steering input like this and the amount of torque that this car provides, it's only going to do one thing, and that's spin up. So in the first couple of races that you do here this week, be careful in how you take it, but also be aware that there could be potential spinners, because you want to avoid those at all costs. Now, as you can see, we're starting to apply the throttle here ever slightly. And what I do, as you can see there, that's now at a number 3 on the dash. So what I've done is, as I've got around here and when I'm starting to apply the throttle, I short shift into 3rd gear. Now, it is quite difficult to do, guys, because you've got full steering lock, but it is the best way to exit this corner safely, is to be short shifting into third gear. If you really do struggle with shifting into third gear while you've got full steering lock on, just be ever so careful when you're coming out of the corner, and then as you start to unwind the steering, then shift up into third. But you can see here, I'm still only really on half throttle. And then I short shift into fourth as well, because I've spun the car up plenty times in third gear. At Spa, at here. Third gear, you would think, is a safe gear to start putting your foot down on the throttle when you're in a straight line. It's not. So be careful, guys. Short shift into third and short shift into fourth, because then once you're in fourth, that's when you can safely get full throttle. Steering wheel is straight and just nice and flat round the right hander, covering as little track as possible all the way up into spoon. Now, if your battery deploys correctly, I found you will be able to reach 8th gear up here. If it doesn't and it's decided not to deploy, you won't be able to reach 8th gear up this hill, so just be aware of that, guys. And then hugging the right hand side, and then we start to turn in. We'll just rewind it back a touch. We start to turn in, kind of after the concrete patch that we concrete runoff that we've just gone past, as the apex comes into view. And you can see there, I start to brake just as we're approaching, as we've turned in, just as we're approaching the red and white curb. Shifting down into 7th, we want to hit this apex, very similar to the first corner spoon is. We want to hit the first apex, allow the car to move over to the right hand side, and then bring it back into the second apex. 6th gear, allow the car to move over to the right hand side. Now this is important, guys. If you really want to maximize the exit here and maximize your speed down the back straight through 130R into the prime overtaking opportunity, which is into the last chicane, you want to, while you're trail braking in 6th gear, allow the car to move over this curb and get your right wheels onto the AstroTurf. Because in some instances in other cars, there's not a lot of grip out here, but we've got a lot of high downforce here, and the car has actually got some grip out here. So shift down into 5th once you're over the red and white curb. As you can see, the halo is pointing into the middle of the curb there. And then we're still feathering the throttle and feathering the brake. And then once the nose of the car is pointed in and you start to see the kind of the peak of the apex, that's when you can then get on full throttle, open up the steering and run all the way down. Now, be careful how early you get on the throttle here, guys, because if you get on the throttle too early, you know what's going to happen. You're going to spin the car. See it happen in GT cars, F3. It's no different with Formula 1 as well. And of course, as well, be careful when you run out here on the exit of Spoon Corner that you don't run too far wide, because there is quite a large bump here on the entry of this red and white curb. And it really does unsettle the car. One, you get a off track, and two, you lose a lot of speed as well, because the car really unsettles and bobbles up and down, so you would be a sitting duck to someone behind. And then it is full throttle here all the way down up through 130R. Move it over to the left hand side so you're covering as little track as possible, because it is a slight bend up there. And this is just such a joyful corner this is in Formula 1. So much speed and so much control. Turn in at the 50, cover the corner, the curb, There's no need really to allow the car to drift all the way out here on the runoff because it's just unnecessary track that we're covering. Of course, if you're in an overtaking manoeuvre, use it. And then we come up to the last chicane, which once again, I will presume we'll see a number of crashes here. We see it in every series, every car. F1's going to be no different. I've seen a lot of crashes into chicanes the first 2 weeks of this series, and I don't expect this to be any different. So it is the prime overtaking opportunity, but be careful that you don't lock up your tyres and that you don't run into the back of someone. But what we're keeping an eye out for is the 100 bulb marker, and we're braking just after it. As you can see, once that's gone out of my vision, that's when I'm braking. And I'm braking in a straight line, quite hard braking, shifting down into third gear, and we start to turn in. If you can see here, as the white line on the left starts to curve in, that's really when we then start to start to turn in, and you can see the apex of the corner. Now we're trail braking through here. The key to going through this corner quickly is trail braking and controlling the front nose of the car. And you can see here, I'm trail braking while I go over this corner because that's what we can do. We can get 2 wheels over this corner. Car does bobble up a little bit, but it is the quickest way. We can go through here in second gear, but second gear was a lot slower. 2 Temp slower, I found, because you were then you had to it really slowed the car up, and you had to be very easy on the throttle on exit as well. So you can get into second gear here. Of course, it depends if you're just overtaking someone and you're coming in at more of a sharper angle. But third gear is the optimum gear through here, I found. Nice and easy, just trail braking, controlling the car. As we get over that corner, as you can see, I'm just applying about half throttle. Then we're back trail braking over this corner here. We want 2 wheels up on the red and white curb. We don't want it on the green stuff because that's too much and it really unsettles the car and you lose speed. And then as we go over it, you can see my throttle inputs. I'm applying the throttle, unwind the steering wheel, and we have in third gear so much more traction out of this chicane than we do in second gear. Even if you short shift from second gear to third gear, there's just a lack of speed and there's a lack of traction. In third gear, the revs at a nice level and we can get on the throttle nice and early compared to second gear or any other way. And then it is just working your way through the gears, hit the DRS line again and the button, and across the line, and there we go at 26.45. And that's it, guys. That is how we do a lap around Suzuka. Not really much more else to say about that. It's, as always, plenty of practice is required in this car. It's a particular way to drive. The corners here come at you so fast, but the only way to really go around here quickly is to just run some laps and get used to how quick you can take these corners, especially through the center S's. They're, as I keep saying, they come at you in a blink of an eye, and it's just each corner sets up the next corner, and if you don't get one right, you compromise your whole first half of your lap. Really important to take into consideration there, guys. But hopefully, as always, that makes you more consistent, makes you faster, and hopefully gain plenty of safety rating and iRacing this week. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.